What's up, guys? This is Danny Langloss, and you're listening to the Leadership Excellence Podcast. Please hit that subscribe button so you never miss another episode. And consider giving us a rating or review so we can keep growing and help more people. Thank you. There are so many things that impact our ability to achieve success, but none are more important than leadership. Individuals and organizations rise and fall with leadership. We are here to help you rise. Thank you for joining us. This is the Leadership Excellence Podcast. Hello, leaders, and welcome to Leadership Excellence. My name is Danny Langloss, and today I'm joined by Karen Zeigler, and we're going to be discussing innovative leadership strategies. Karen is the CEO of Revamp Success. She works with C-suite leaders, line of business executives, and business owners to improve performance, increase morale, and eliminate problems inhibiting their success. Karen helps leaders design the future of how their companies work by delivering experiential design thinking, training, and consulting. I'm very intrigued by design leadership and am excited to learn more about it today. Karen, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me, Danny. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you. Our listeners are in for a real treat today. You've really opened my eyes to a world that I was unfamiliar with. A style of leadership, a thinking of leadership that I hadn't seen before. And I appreciate you doing that. And I think our listeners, if they haven't heard of this concept and some of these strategies, will as well. Karen, can you share with our listeners your journey and what's led you to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. I started actually in the financial industry, and I was one of those young bucks out of college that was ready to take on the world. And it was funny because, you have that college course where they ask you to interview 3 career paths and you choose, that's how you chose where you went. Well, I, at the time, brokerage or investments was a sales business, and they just had a crash, and the broker that I was interviewing had witnessed people jumping out of buildings. I think it was in the 80s or whatever. And I was like, no, thank you. No, thank you. I interviewed an insurance guy, and it was all about sales and pressure and pressure and pressure. And I interviewed a banker, and at the time it was all about service. And so that's where I chose my career. Little did I know that banking was about to get on a skyrocket into the sales field. And that's, led to the, scandals like Wells Fargo and such, where they've, manipulated their sales habits and so many different things. But my intentions when I started in the banking career was to be one of service. And so when I finished the year of management training program, I was 23. I think I was the youngest officer of the bank at the time. And I was scared to death. They were going to put me in a brand new office, and I had no clue what I was doing. I had obviously studied a lot of leadership and stuff. So, that old saying about, is it nature, is it nurture? I really am not sure, but I began to apply the techniques of design thinking before I even realized what design thinking was. Because as a new manager, obviously they surrounded me with people with a lot of experience. And so I, began asking them, how does a good performing team work? And, how does a bad performing team work? What, tell me your experiences, good, bad, and ugly in performing as a banking center. And so we started in this little bitty branch in the middle of nowhere, how expansions were at the outskirts of town at that time. And within 6 months, our branch was in the lead, and we had won contests for the sales for that year. And then the mergers began. The 90s for banking was full of mergers. And so pretty much every 2 years, I was getting a promotion. I was getting the opportunity to bring 2 teams together from different bank mergers and to recreate performance. And but it was very tiresome because there was something about it that just wasn't scratching the soul, if you will. And even though I was very successful and obviously, performed and went up the ranks. So at that time, I kind of transitioned to investments because I had become familiar with the sales aspect at that point. And I was about to raise my daughter. So I said, being a solo practitioner would be beneficial to my family. So I went that route so I didn't have to manage employees at the time. And I did that for 10 years as well. As that approached an end, still had that soul itch of not knowing what it was I was supposed to be doing. There were aspects of investments I loved, and obviously there's benefits to that career. So I took another decade and I wrote a couple books and I did a lot of volunteer work. And so still, thinking that perhaps that method of service was kind of the answer to that soul itch. And so as I kind of wrapped up the end of that, still not having found what I was looking for, I circled back to a book that I had read and actually got a coaching certification in, Simon Sinek's Start with the Why book. An excellent book if your listeners haven't read it. But basically, as a coach for his program, you take your coachees through this process of identifying what it is they do and why they do it. And so I decided at that point that I would do that again, but for myself this point. And so because I was at this midpoint in life that I'm like, I'm not done yet, but I don't want to go back to doing something that's just not satisfying, even though it, creates some form of worldly success and it provides a service. Obviously, I wanted to find satisfaction in it as well.
When did you start your career with Bank of America?
Year or age?
You pick.
It was 89 was when I started it.
1980s.
Yeah, so it was not Bank of America then. It was a little bank in Fort Myers, Florida called Bank of Lee County, I believe. And then we went from Bank of Lee County to CNS Bank to CNS Sovereign to Nations Bank to Bank of America. So in the span of 10 years, we went through those 5 mergers. And in fact, in my last objective on the banking center side of things, I was involved in the mergers and acquisitions team, and it was right when interstate banking was taking place. So I took part in a 3-bank merger that actually allowed Bank of America to become an interstate bank and offer banking services across state lines.
I ask about when you did that because that's incredibly impressive. I mean, we're still at a point where we're working towards, but not anywhere near gender equality in the workforce. And for you to rise at a young age back in the 80s into this leadership position in a pretty male-dominated work environment, and then ultimately rise to a vice president with the Bank of America, I think is just astounding, just incredible.
Yeah. I if you look across sectors, even though perhaps people could say that the financial industry is still pretty male dominated at the top. I would say middle to lower is very heavily on the female side of things. And I think they certainly are allowing females to serve in leadership roles that are meaningful.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. Want to showcase that. It's, gender equality, social justice, are some things that are I'm very passionate about. And to see you being one of the trailblazers really paving the way out there is awesome. And it's great to have you here today. So let's step into what are the 5 steps of design thinking. If you could maybe list the steps out, maybe we could go through them one at a time if that works.
Yeah, I'll list them out for you first, and then, you can ask me questions as you like. The 5 phases are, the first one being titled empathy. The next one is titled defining the problem. The next one's ideation, prototyping, and testing.
Okay.
Now, design thinking historically started as a means for innovating products. And then it, of course, as the country or the world actually transitioned to services, then it became a manner of innovating services. But what's been discovered over the first 20 years of design thinking is that really it can be applied to any problem. So now you see design thinking being applied to leadership. You see it being applied to business model innovation. You just see it being applied to change management initiatives, employee engagement, culture. Pretty much if there's a challenge or a problem going on inside an organization, whether it be about the getting more customers or serving the clients better, or developing a solid foundation within the company, design thinking has application.
So it seems like with design thinking, and see if I'm tracking with you the right way.
Sure.
The world has become so much more complex.
Yeah.
We're not completely based around factories anymore, where you go in and you're making a specific part and standing on an assembly line. I mean, artificial intelligence is really replacing those jobs. So now it's about how do we create unique approaches, design specific approaches for what your company is, for those you're serving, for those team members, especially in a world where there's so much about, you talk about employee engagement, but a big driver of that is employee experience. And how do you custom that for the talent that you have within your team to help them reach their full potential, so they have that commitment, are willing to give their loyalty, that passionate discretionary effort. So you're really designing the work environment through that leadership. Am I tracking there?
Yes, you
where I'm
are.
wrong.
No, you're tracking wonderfully. In fact, it's funny you mentioned the industrial age, because I wrote a post not long ago about how human productivity is transforming from the industrial age through the information age to now the experience age. And it really is not only how our globe has evolved, but also how we've evolved as humans, and how we just continue to evolve is the only word I can think of right now, to our true nature. I believe it has not only to do with how we work or how our businesses work, but actually who we are. Because the industrial age was all about, you needed butts in the seats to do the work. It was all about having the able bodies to do the work. The information age was all about logical thinking, brain, information. And then the experience age is more about, okay, who is it we are? And we are creative beings by nature. And we're not just left brain beings. We're not walking around with one side of our head bigger than the other. We have a right brain too, and that's our creative brain. And so it's really about leading people and developing people's whole self, not just, their body, having them show up to do a task, or their brain, the logical side of their brains, but the full potential that comes from tapping into their creativity as well.
And that's a conversation I've been having with so many experts like yourself on the podcast and then away from the podcast. This whole concept that, and understanding that people want to come to work as their whole self.
Yeah.
They don't want to have to be one person when they're away and at home and another person when they're at work. And what we're asking of people and what's needed in today's society is so much more than a body. We need a mind, and we need to unleash the power of that mind. And as you talk about that and coming to work as your whole self, and one of the topics we've been talking a lot about is motivation. Then I'll, pull back in and we'll go through these 5 steps. But I'm reading a book called Drive by Daniel Pink. And
love him.
You talk about the left brain things. The right brain is where we're really engaging people today. And it's funny, and I say this in a lot of different ways, but he broke it down into 3 words. The 3 things that are the biggest motivators, the biggest drivers. The first was autonomy. The second was mastery. Third was purpose. And so I bring that up and tie that into our conversation because those are the things that I believe design leadership and design thinking are really tapping into as we shift more and want things out of the right brain, right?
Yeah.
Or creative side.
Yeah. And if you think about it, there's so much talk about human-centered approaches to business, human-centered innovation. Well, humans have 3 aspects to themselves. Obviously, we have a body, so there are certain things we can do or not do with that body. We have a mind, which provides the logical, the thinking, the linear thinking. But then we also have, call it soul, call it spirit, call it right brain, or whatever, that spirit within us that houses our gifts, our talents, those things that we bring to the world. And the way we bring them to the world is through being creative. And that looks different. It's not just about making art or making music. It can be hundreds of things. So Yeah, most definitely. People want to bring their whole selves to the workplace, and leading by design is truly a way that managers can lead the whole person to help them discover, because as it was for me, people know that something's missing, but they don't know what it is. And really often what's missing is that gift that they have that they need to bring out to the table. So as a leader, it's understanding, how can I help them identify what those gifts are? How can I let them prototype and test and create until they discover what they are? And it's really an engaging process for leaders and employees. It's really a empowering process. It creates those things that Daniel mentioned there, autonomy and the other things that you discussed.
So if you're going to go sit and work with a company, if you were coming to the city of Dixon, where I'm the city manager of, and we were going to train and to implement design thinking, design leadership, we start with empathy. What does that look like?
Empathy, and I believe the statistics are 80% of us are not empathetic. And I can attest, when I was a young 20-something-year-old, that I was not an empathetic person. So I didn't choose the title, but that's the title we've given. Empathy is really only a small part of what we're doing, but the goal of it, the empathy phase, is to understand the user, whether it be the employee or the customer or a partner or whatever, but to understand them, their needs, and the problems and challenges they face. So the way this differs, say for instance, and I'll use my experience as a banking center manager. When I got my first promotion, I got promoted to a banking center that was not performing well. So it wasn't performing well. Then it was going through a merger. I was merging two teams together. There were people that were on the chopping block. So I had to go in there and talk about performance, but there was already a lot of fear in that setting. So what I needed to understand as a manager there was, what do they see what do they deem as good performance? What do they see as the hindrance to performance? What do they see as things that make for high performing teams? So it's really understanding all of the users, how they see the world. Because how I see the world and how maybe 10 different people see the world is going to be different, but there are going to be common threads throughout. And it becomes less about performance and really more about removing the blocks to performance, and the blocks being the problems that the users are having. So back to your Dixon situation. How many people work for the city of Dixon?
103.
Okay. And how many leaders do you have?
So we have somewhere around 10 department heads. Mm-hmm. And then we've got to have at least 15 more to 20 more people in leadership positions.
Okay.
Formal leadership positions.
The way I like to approach teaching organizations design thinking is really about building an ecosystem. So I would start with yourself as a city leader and whoever your direct reports are. And I would identify a challenge that just that upper level team is facing. Then I would go through the empathy in the 5 stages with you and with the team. Then once you solve those issues, what I like to see, and I think it's the most effective model, is to have those that have just gone through the process themselves and been taught the process, then to turn around and teach it to the next level. And then they are to solve the problems of the next level. And so forth. So it goes down the organization, but then it comes back up, because when you get your frontline managers using design thinking to solve the problems that the people actually facing the customers are solving, then they can trickle back up to the top what the true problems are that are maybe blocking out, growth or income or efficiency, whatever it is. So it begins to be a breathable organism rather than innovation being an island. Innovation is an ecosystem where not only is it happening at the top, but it's happening at the bottom, and the things that perhaps are out of their control at the bottom or maybe not within their budgets, they can bubble up to the top to be addressed, so that, managers are no longer starting these change initiatives at the top that no one at the bottom cares about or wants to do. It's really making meaningful change that's going to move the company forward, not be resisted from one party or the next.
The change management and change leadership is such an important thing. You talk about the first step of design leadership being empathy, true understanding. One of the laws of leadership I've adopted from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits is seek first to understand, then be understood.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then as you walk into this change leadership, and like this can't just be a top-down thing. One of the change leadership, something I just love to talk about, because when I was the police chief, one of the things with police officers, and it's probably the same with everybody, is they hate change, right? Yeah. And so we created this formula of change leadership that involvement equals investment equals commitment. Nobody's going to become committed if they're not invested. Nobody's going to become invested if they're not involved. And then so very high levels of commitment transition to really what we're going through, and that's ownership, to where people are doing things because they believe in it, because they want to do it, not because they're told they have to. And so this process aligns really well, and I just love the understanding.
Yes. So on some level, you already are practicing design thinking. So and the thing I mentioned the 5 phases, but before even that all begins, leaders have to have a visionary question that they want to, that starts the conversation to understanding. So it could be, how might we improve performance in our organization, or how might we deliver more effective service? The vision question is how might we, and I love that because it's very simple, but it reframes something. So you take your problem, any problem you want to list. If you've ever heard the quote, where attention goes, energy flows. You don't want to focus your attention on the problem. Reframing using the vision question with design thinking takes your focus off of the problem and onto the vision you want to create. But by its very nature, when you get people focused on the vision, being involved, invested, and committed to the vision, then those problems begin to fall away, because obviously in order to reach the vision, they have to not exist. So you give them credence, but not that much. And you also ensure that what I see as the problem is what everybody else sees as the problem, because that's a lot of change management issues. Management thinks this is the problem, employees think this is the problem, and no one's on the same page. And so there's this battle of resistance going on. Not just the fear, but there's also actual resistance, because it's really not what management is doing is not serving employees, and what employees are doing is not necessarily serving managers. So it's a kind of a battle.
Yeah, you broke down something that's super important to me and to our team. When we focus on the problem, our energy starts to go there. Simon Sinek talks about some people see the obstacle, some people see the prize. Those that see the obstacle get the obstacle. Those that see the prize get the prize. And so one of our leadership mindsets and philosophies we have implemented, I'm actually working right now with a few people on some of the consulting work I'm doing, is we have to adopt a solutions, not problems approach. Like when a problem exists, somebody who sees it is going to see it as a problem. I see those situations and automatically begin generating solutions. Like it isn't a negative response. It's like exciting that we're going to solve whatever it is. And here are these solutions. And then we create this environment where we say, you can't bring a problem without a solution. And through the police department, you'd hear it all the time when something would come up and somebody go, solutions, not problems. It automatically reframes as we move forward. So well, and focusing on the problems is your quickest route to self-sabotage, because what you focus on multiplies. And so, if you've ever had the situation where you solve one problem and then 10 more pop up, that is the benefits of focusing on a problem, or even focusing on a problem to solve it.
You want to focus on the solution. There will be problems even in the solution you create. That's just the nature of humanity, but you're focused in the direction you want to go, not necessarily in looking back at something that's existing, i.e. a problem.
So we begin with empathy, understanding. We define the problem. And in both of those things, in this style of leadership, you're inclusive to make sure that you're not just sitting around in a boardroom with high-level executives of your company, but you're actually engaging your team. So you have a full understanding, and you have a full understanding of what it is we want to tackle, what it is we want to make better, what it is we want to add layers of greatness to.
Yeah, absolutely. Defining the problem isn't leaders defining the problem. It's actually the employees defining the problems. So in the team, obviously this doesn't happen in product innovation or service innovation, but to a degree it does, but overall not. In a team design thinking scenario, once you have interviewed all of your users, meaning all of your employees and people that are related to the problem, which could be maybe another department or someone outside of the team. Once you've interviewed all those and you've kind of synthesized all that information, I call it sifting, but that's when you sift down to the problem. You actually have the ability to go back to the users now. Okay, now that I have heard everybody, and here's the common threads I find, and you kind of share so you're letting them define the problem. Now, it may be very similar or ideally the same thing you saw as a leader, because leaders have a obviously different perspective, but it creates buy-in that, oh yeah, they were listening to me. They heard me. Yes, that's exactly what it is. And if you're off track, they go, no, that's not what we meant. And you can it reduces the opportunity for conflict. So because they're going to confirm, yeah, that's the problem we need to solve. That's, and then you can go about priorities and budgets and all those other discussions before you move into ideation.
So let's move in. Let's take a step into ideation. Bring that to life for us.
Yeah. Ideation, one of the fallacies about ideation is that it's just this big brainstorming session. And maybe there's some aspects of that, though traditional brainstorming isn't always that effective. But I like to think of ideation as it is the bringing together of the needs of the user, in this case, the employees or the customers, and the resources of the organization. So like, for instance, when I was a young banking center manager, I had zero budget. I had zero authority to change any systems. I had a job. I was to go do it. Don't ask for any help. We're busy with a merger. So it doesn't have to have thousands of dollars like a traditional innovation project. You can say, when you're having your user discussions, our budgets are limited. Obviously, our systems are what they are, but knowing that, how would you do this? So ideation really is a marrying of the needs of the user and the resources of the organization, whether that's financial, people, systems, whatever the case may be. So with those constraints put into place, then that's when the creativity begins.
Love that. So needs plus resources equals an environment of creativity.
Yeah. And if you do any reading on creativity, you will find that the more constraints that are imposed upon a person, especially a creative person, the better they rise to the challenge, and the more creative they become.
Based on constraints?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
So the difference is, when I heard that, I don't think I heard it correctly. I thought of constraints as something similar to micromanagement, but that's not that at all. Constraints as far as like, here's what we need and here's our resources. So now we've got to become very, very creative to find the solutions.
Exactly.
Got it.
And this was kind of a story I read recently about Steve Jobs, and he wanted the iPhone that they were developing. I don't know if it was the first one or another one, but he wanted it to fit in their pocket. And they just kept coming back with a phone that was bigger than that. And they were like, we can't do that. We can't do that. There's no way we can do that. And he took the phone that they built and he threw it in a fish tank, and of course, air bubbles floated up from the top. He goes, there's more room in there. I want you to find how to, make it happen. And
Wow.
and obviously we have the iPhone today, which is by far one of the most popular phones. And it's because of the constraints he put on it. So constraints, I don't know why it is, but that, people rise to the challenge when they have constraints, and they show you, I can be creative. Let me show you how creative I can be. So it's cool to see that. So, which is a little different than brainstorming or blue skying something, things that, if we had all the money in the world, it's not that. Because all the money in the world and being able to do anything for users really doesn't matter if it's not what they need. So
Yeah.
that's what ideation is all about.
I got to tell you, Karen, I'm so enjoying this conversation. I'm learning so much as we're talking in different ways and thinking about the way we think and lead and what we believe in and channeling it through here and seeing why design leadership is such a powerful, innovative leadership strategy. So I appreciate you breaking that down. And I got to believe that a lot of people listening are having all these different light bulbs go off in their head and having all these puzzle pieces just like floating down and making sense now. How about prototyping?
So prototyping obviously looks different in the management aspect than it does in product or service innovation. To give context to it, product innovation would be like if I was building a new website, prototyping might be simple as, creating a PowerPoint that shows what the different screens are going to look like, or the tabs of a website. So you didn't go through the expense of building the website. You just threw together some samples of what the pages might look like. That would be a prototype. And you want to prototype, obviously, with the least time and the least expense, because prototyping and testing is a reiterative process. So if I was building a website for you, which I couldn't do, so don't ask, but, and I showed you, here's the way I envision the 5 pages based on what you tell me, you can say, no, well, I can pitch that and give you another, or you can give me feedback. Well, that doesn't meet my need here or there. So it's really about the prototyping and testing. It's unlikely that you'll get it 100% right the first time because, there's always a check back with the user. So with bringing it back to leadership, say you define the problem, say, a lot of people may be leaders of sales teams and performance is down. And I want to make sure I make this point too, because this is really cool. When you're talking about sales performance and you go to someone to have a conversation about performance, it really becomes all about them and they're bad and they're not doing well. With design thinking, it takes the shift off the individual and making them wrong and making it a separate identity, making the performance wrong. So, for instance, if in the back in my banking center days, I would have performance issues, and we talk about what's good performance look like and what's inhibiting performance. Well, it could be training, it could be lack of materials, it could be maybe they don't know the sales process. There's a number of things it could be. So in the prototyping and testing, you're just testing different things. Maybe they don't understand how to ask open-ended questions. That's a simple thing. So you want to provide that. The prototyping is all about trying to meet that need in a way to see if it is the fix if it moves you forward in the vision. So prototyping as leadership could be something as simple as training. It could be as simple as, how the process works with the back office. It could be how they interact with their teammates. It could be how communication is with the leader. There's a number of things. So you want to just begin to prototype and test different ways of doing it. If the way that it's being done right now isn't working, well, okay, what else can we try? And this is where you really can get to tap into that whole person, because when you talk about what the problem is and ideas for creating a prototype to test, you can then in turn, okay, well, what part of this do you want to participate in? What part of this solution really gets you excited. Maybe you have someone who loves to write, so they want to write the copy for the sales script, or maybe you have someone who wants to be a professional speaker one day, and so you allow them to stand before the group and do the training. Or, maybe you have someone who is great at hospitality, so they want to set the external environment in a better way. So you really begin to tap into those creative aspects of the individual, then they can contribute to the team in a more meaningful way. Not only more meaningful to you as their leader and to the performance of the team, but more meaningful to them. Because it's just they're not showing up and being a body doing their job mindlessly. They're actually bringing their best selves to the table.
Love that.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's what it's all about. That's what leadership is all about, helping people, become the best versions of themselves, and seeing them reach and fulfill their purpose, their passion, the impact they want to create, watching them grow, watching the confidence rise. I mean,
oh yeah,
just belonging, right? Mm-hmm. Pillar 2 in the 7 pillars of ownership we've created is sense of belonging.
Yeah.
Like, people want to belong. We all want to belong. There was a great post today on LinkedIn on somebody that I'm following that had to do with belonging, the importance mm-hmm. of belonging. Mm-hmm. And this process really shows people that they're cared about, they're valued, they're trusted, they're respected, they belong, they matter.
Yeah.
And it's such a powerful, powerful tool for culture and ecosystem, as you talked about. So so when you're prototyping, pardon me, so step 4 is prototyping, step 5 is testing. So is this something where you're prototyping, testing, how do those, are they completely separate? Are they intertwined?
They flow together. Ideation, prototyping, and testing can be a loop that you can get on, especially for the more complex things. We're talking about sales, so that's can be a very simple thing, but for more challenging things, it can take on a little more life to it. So prototyping is really, okay, this is how we think it would work. Testing is going back to the user and going, okay, this is the problem you defined. These are the solutions we came up with. Here's our prototype. Let us test it. Say training was the issue for the sales team. So you launched a sales training and you let your employee that wants to speak do it, or this person wrote the script or the handout or whatever. Then you go back to them. Okay, how did that work? Was the thing that you were, not understanding, are you understanding it now? Do you like the way we did this? Is there something we could improve? It's that, can we improve it even further? That takes you back to ideation, prototyping, and testing. So that's the great thing about it, because the employee is no longer the problem. The employee is the solution. And like you said, Danny, their input matters. What they bring to the table matters. Really, everyone is on an equal playing field, because everyone is trying to achieve the same vision. If that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And they're bringing their best to, achieving that vision.
Yeah. And what I hear there is aligning mission and purpose.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Understanding the vision, aligning mission and purpose. And there's nothing more powerful than having purpose-driven people on your team.
Yeah.
If you do, and you can't align their purpose and what drives them with the purpose of the team and the organization, then things need to be reconsidered. But there's a way, if you've got those right purpose-driven people, and it's being intentional about it. And, it's funny, I think about old school leadership. I think about, and not that it was bad, but I think about the leadership when I came on the police department at 21 years old.
Yeah.
This can be, people can look at this and say, wow, this is a lot of work. It's a lot easier just to tell somebody to go do something, right?
Yeah.
In the top-down hierarchy. But what you're describing here and what you've walked through here, it's just so clear. These components create excellence.
Yeah.
Organizational excellence, the highest levels of performance, by individuals and by teams. And I can see why now you're so passionate about design leadership, and it's all become much clearer to me in this whole concept.
Yeah. And it's funny. I believe it's Gartner research. I'd have to look up the specifics, but I think it was like 74% of employees spend, I think it was either an hour and a half or 3 hours a day doing workarounds to their job. And they calculated that out, and it is millions and millions of dollars to companies, because companies, it reminds me of the quote, you can do things, oh shoot, it's not coming to me. But basically, in pursuit of effective, we don't do the, in pursuit of trying to do things correctly, we don't do things that are correct, meaning we don't, again, the vision of just solving the right problem. But yeah, that goes away with design thinking, because you're solving the right problem. You're solving the problem that matters to the people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've got just a couple minutes left here. And one of the things that I'd done in some of my research, and it was something that you shared with me some time ago when we first met, was the 5 reasons why design leadership is the future of leadership. I'm going to walk through those really fast. Okay. I'm going to have you make a couple comments as related to some that you think are the most important.
Sure.
The first one is creativity. The second one is artificial intelligence. And it said the future of human work is imagination, creativity, and strategy, because so many other things are being automated. The third is experience economy, being dialed in with your customers once and with your team members once, and really engaging your customers, because they want more than a product now. They want an experience. Complexity, the idea that every area of the business now has to be interconnected, making complex problems and the solutions to them simple. And then the last one is job crafting, which really dials in specifically on employee experience. So of those 5 things, maybe what 1 or 2 of them are the most important statement or call to action for design leadership?
Well, it's funny you use the word connection in describing some of that. I think all 5 of them are interconnected. I don't know that you can separate them apart, but it is the vision of the future that we're headed into with AI, for example. With AI is being designed to take away the mundane tasks, those tasks that needed a body and to show up and do the work can now be done by a machine. And so if you take away all the mundane tasks that only require a body, or you take away a lot of them, then if you're talking about the human again, between body, logical mind, and creative mind, what's left is the creativity. If you no longer need a body for most of the jobs, and the logical mind is not necessarily as important as the creative mind, because we want to progress with innovation, then that's where designing comes in. Job crafting is just an element of that. That is, when you're leading by design, you are helping the person craft the job that is right for them, the one that they're passionate about, the one that they show up and do their best work for. And so now, say your team was originally 10 people doing all the same job. Now you have 10 people doing very different jobs that feed into the same goal. Well, I don't know if you've ever worked with creatives, but it can be like herding cats. So how do you not only craft the job for the person themselves, allowing them to do their best work and do the work that they're the best at, how do you begin to bring those 10 pieces together to accomplish the goal that you have as a company or as an organization? That's why leading by design is so relevant.
I love it. When you say that and you talk about bringing those people together, the phrase that comes to my mind is synergy of champions. The idea that one person can do incredible things. When you bring 10 people together that can do incredible things, it doesn't multiply their effectiveness or impact by 10. It multiplies it by like 1,000.
Oh, yeah.
And so that synergy of champions and the synergy of bringing all this together. Karen, do you have a specific call to action or challenge to leaders and aspiring leaders who are listening to this podcast?
Well, I would just say that if you haven't looked into design thinking, I certainly would recommend it, especially if you're not nearing retirement age or not ready to give up impacting people in your lives. I mean, that's what leadership is all about. Regardless of how long you've been leading, leading by design or leading as a designer will allow you to have even a greater impact. And you may find there's a lot of things, if you're a great leader already, that you're doing that really align with design thinking. But it's just where our future is headed. It's what our employees and our customers want. And quite frankly, it releases a lot of pressure that leaders carry on themselves. A lot of times leaders, especially those that are micromanaging or stressed out about performance, they're carrying these burdens as leaders that really aren't theirs to carry. And it's out of fear and of being vulnerable, a fear of looking like they're a failure. There's a number of fears, but that they're weighing themselves down with responsibilities that their team would gladly begin to share with them in order to be a part of a bigger vision and in order to bring them their whole and their best self to work.
Love that. Absolutely love that. And I think people in leadership positions think that they have to have all the answers. They have to have all the solutions. And the fact of the matter is, if that were the case, if you needed to do everything, you wouldn't need your team.
Yeah, exactly.
And the more that we understand and realize our job is to be there to help and to support our people, to give them the resources, to give the direction, to include them and and then get out of their way and let them go after it. Let them go get it. So powerful. Karen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
No, yeah, this has been a great conversation. I just really appreciate you taking the time to share this with our listeners.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So if you're interested in learning more about Karen, more about leadership by design, and the details for the podcast, there's going to be links on how you can connect with Karen. Again, going back through design leadership, the 5 steps are empathy, defining the problem, ideation, prototyping, and testing. And a lot of times 3, 4, and 5 work together, become in a loop as you take your organization and you look to achieve and sustain excellence. So many great pieces of information, so much more clarity on the concept. To me, now I understand why it is so powerful, as we moved, from years ago in the industrial age to the information age to now what truly is that experience age. To our listeners, thank you for sharing this time with us. If you found this episode helpful, please consider subscribing, giving us a rating, leaving a review, sharing it with your network. This truly helps us help more people. If you're interested in receiving more cutting-edge leadership information, you can subscribe to our email list on our website. We promise not to overwhelm your inbox. The direct link is in the podcast description. Again, thank you for joining us today. And remember, always be committed to excellence.